Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video we got another season preview video to discuss. In today's video we're looking at the Dallas Stars and the Colorado Avalanche, two teams who were two of the top teams in the Central Division last year. We got to the second round of the playoffs last year. We'll look at how they did in the offseason and how they're shaping up heading into the start of next season. We'll talk all that coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here on the Internet Hockey Channel. Before I begin this video, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. We're never able to without you guys, so if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe down below. Don't forget to comment down in the comment section. Those something else in today's video. Now, I don't have the Dallas Stars or Colorado Avalanche's logo. Like we said, we have only pre-1990s teams. So they have a banner of the two teams and what they used to be. Colorado Avalanche, which used to be Quebec Nordiques. Dallas Stars, which used to be Minnesota North Stars. So I'm keeping these two logos up for today because today we're looking at a season preview series, looking at the Colorado Avalanche and the Dallas Stars. These two teams were really good last year. We'll look at how they did in the offseason and how they're shaping up going into next year. So we'll start with the Dallas Stars. This past year was one of the best seasons for the Stars in recent memory, having a 52-21-9 record for 113 points. First in the Central Division, first in the Western Conference, and second in the entire NHL, only next to New York Rangers. So they had a fantastic regular season. They had 298 goals for, which was third in the NHL, so they're a top three team in the offensive category, and they were 234 goals against, which was 8th in the NHL. So not a top 5 team, but they were a top 10 team in the goals against category. So Dallas was a pretty good team this year, both offensively, defensively, just all around a really good season this past year for Dallas. Point scorers, Jason Robertson led the team with 80 points. He was followed by Joe Pavelski, who had 67 points, and Johnston, Hintz, and Duchesne all had 65 points. So lots of players hit over 60-plus points this past year for the Stars, so that's really good to see. Then for the Dallas Stars, we saw Wyatt Johnston lead the team with 32 goals, followed by Rumours, Hintz, who had 30, and Jason Robertson, who had 29. So lots of players who hit over 20 goals this past year for Dallas. Those were three leaders, so interesting stuff there. The rookie scorer leader was Logan Stankoven, who hit 6 goals, 8 assists, and 14 points this year. Was a really great rookie sensation there for the Dallas Stars, so pretty good to see him there. And then for the playoff scores, remember this team made the playoffs as the top seed, played the Vegas Golden Knights in the first round, lost the first two, won the next three, lost game 6, won game 7, eventually advanced to round 2, played the Avalanche, which we'll get to in a second, in round 2. They lost the first game, won the next 3, lost game 5, and then won game 6, so they were able to advance to conference final. And in the conference final, they would lose in 6 games. They were up 2-1 at one point, but they did lose 3 straight to fall 6 games in the conference final to Edmonton. So interesting stuff there. But in that playoff run, Robertson, Heiskanen, and Johnston led the team with 16 points, while Wyatt Johnston led the team with 10 goals, and Robertson and Heiskanen both had 6 goals. So interesting stuff there. As Dallas was a really good team this past year, and we're just not able to make it past Edmonton in the conference finals. So interesting stuff there. If you look at their additions and losses from this past year, if you look at their additions, they brought back Matt Duchesne, Matej Blumel, Sam Steele, and Nils Lundqvist. Steele, Lundqvist, and Duchesne were all UFAs. Blumel, I think, was an RFA. So interesting players who they brought back there, but they also bring in a couple of other players. They brought in Cole Lind, who is a solid depth player from, I think, Seattle, so interesting pickup there. They brought Cole and Blackwell, who I think should be a fourth-line player there in Dallas, so that's a pretty good pickup there. They also bring in a couple of defensemen, including Brendan Smith, who should be a solid 6th, 7th defenseman. Matt Dumba, who should help in the top 4. Lyubushkin should be a solid 3rd pair defenseman, and Kyle Capobianco, who should be a decent depth addition. They also bring in Casey Smith, who should be a solid, really good goalie for the Dallas Stars, and they bring in Magnus Hellberg, who should be a solid 3rd stringer. So lots of interesting adds here. I mean, Lind and Blackwell are more depth additions, but Smith, Dumba, Lyubushkin should all help on the defensive end, and Smith should be a solid backup with Hellberg being the 3rd stringer. So all in all, those are some pretty good additions there for the Dallas Stars. If you look at their losses, they lost Joe Pavelski to retirement, so that was a pretty bad blow for them. They lost Craig Smith to Chicago, so that's a solid depth forward they lost. Scott Reed still UFA. Yanni Hakanpää, these are signed with Toronto, or still UFA, still not officially 100% sure on that, but they did lose him, who's a solid 3rd pair defenseman. I lose Derek Pouliot and Gavin Bayreuther, who were both depth defensemen. They lose Scott Wedgwood, who was a backup last year, a decent one at that, so that was a bad loss. And they lose Matt Murray, who was a 3rd stringer last year. So all in all, not a bad amount of losses. I mean, Joe Pavelski is going to be a horrible blow, and they didn't really replace him, but everyone else who they really lost was replaced by some depth additions or guys on the blue line. So interesting stuff there. But definitely, they made some interesting losses and additions in in free agency. If you look at the trades that they made 3 trades that didn't involve pick-for-pick swaps this past year. They wound up trading Dellandrea to the San Jose Sharks for a 2025 4th-round pick, which was originally the Winnipeg Jets, so that was an interesting move. Dellandrea was starting to fall down the depth chart a little bit, so they moved him to a fresh start. Get a 4th-round pick in return, so that's interesting. They moved Chris Tanev signing rights to the Toronto Maple Leafs in exchange for prospect Matt Ellis and a 2026 7th-rounder. They would later walk away from Max Ellis as a free agent. Tanev winds up signing in Toronto, so they are able to get a 7th-round pick for a player who was never really going to sign in Dallas, so interesting stuff there. And then they also moved Radek Faksa, who was a solid 4th-line player, to the St. Louis Blues in exchange for future consideration. So not a bad move there. Faksa was sort of a casualty at this point, but still it was an interesting move to see him go to St. Louis for nothing. So some interesting moves there from the Dallas Stars. If you look at their top 3 picks from this past year's draft, first was their 1st-round pick, number 29th overall. They took Emil Hemming, who was a right winger, should eventually be a solid top 6 player there. Then in the 5th round, number 158th overall, they took left shot defenseman Niilo-Pekka Muhonen, who should eventually maybe be a solid 3rd pair defenseman, so it's pretty good. And then the 7th round, number 222nd overall, they took William Samuelsson, who's a center, could eventually round out to be a solid 3rd, maybe 4th-line center there for the Stars, so that's a pretty good pickup there. So didn't have too many draft picks, but they did make do with what they had, so interesting stuff there. If you look at the 2 biggest questions I have for this team entering the offseason, one is the Holiday contract. At this point, Thomas Harley has not signed a new contract with Dallas. He was a fantastic defenseman last year, eventually started to work well on a top pair with Miro Heiskanen. Looks like he's going to be a very good and key piece of this team going forward, so that's going to be a huge thing that this team needs to try and figure out. And 2 is the Johnston extension. They really do want to try and keep Johnston around. If they can preferably get him on like a 7 to 8 year deal, that'll be good, but he's entering the final year of his deal. I don't think they want to let this drag on for too long, and I wouldn't be surprised if we tried to hear something about Johnston extension. But in my opinion, the 2 biggest questions entering training camp are the Holiday contract, with him still being an RFA right now, and Johnston potentially getting extended. So interesting stuff there. Next, going over to my projected lineup for the Dallas Stars for this upcoming season. So at this point in time, I currently have Jason Robertson playing on the top line with Rupe Hintz and Logan Stankoven for Dallas. The second line is Jamie Benn with Wyatt Johnston and Maverick Bourque. The third line is Matt Duchene with Tyler Seguin and Mason Marchment. The fourth line, Sam Steele with Colin Blackwell and Evgeny Dadonov, so that's a pretty good forward group. Defensively, I have Harley, once he's signed, playing with Heiskanen. I have Lindell playing with Dumba, and I have Bichelle playing with Lyubushkin, so that's a pretty good defensive core. The 2 spares I have are Brendan Smith and Nils Lundqvist, with Jake Onger being the starter and Casey Smith being the backup, and that would be a captain plan roster should Harley sign for a decent amount. So interesting stuff there. But that's my projected lineup for this team for this upcoming offseason. Going over to my projected point total for this team for this upcoming season, I do still see the Stars being a really good team. I know they maybe got a little bit worse, especially with the Pavelski loss, but I don't think they got too much worse. They should still be one of the top teams in the Central, and I still have them, barring any major collapses due to injuries, being the top team in the Central Division this year. So in my opinion, I have them fitting just a little bit lower than where they were last year. I have them hitting 111 points, which is 2 lower than where they hit last year. So I saw them having a pretty good season, still being the top team in the Central Division, still making the playoffs, so interesting stuff there. Going over to the 3 ways I can see this team improve to get better. One, better play from Onger. Towards the end of the playoff run, he was starting to lose gas. He didn't look overly good. If Onger can bounce back and carry his good regular season play into the playoffs next year, I think the Stars are going to be in a much better position, so I think they need better play from Onger. They need good play from their defense. They did have a little bit of work done on their blue line, like they don't have Tanev anymore, don't have Hakanpää, they brought in Dumba, they brought in Lyubushkin. They need some good play from this new D-core if they're going to have another solid season this year, so that's another thing. And the young guys need to continue to grow. We've seen some really good growth from a guy like Wyatt Johnston last year, Thomas Harley. Now some more guys are going to need to grow, like I have Bichelle making the roster as a rookie. Could he have a solid season if he does make it? Maverick Bourque, if he makes it, could he have a solid season? Stankoven showed flashes of really goodness last year. Could he have some really good season if he was able to make the roster too? So I think growth of these younger guys could definitely help this team move forward. So in my opinion, better play from Onger, good play from their defense, and the young guys growing are going to be the major reasons that this team can definitely get over the next hump. And lastly, going over to my rating for this team, if you look at their offseason, how they did in the free agency, trades, draft picks, I think they had a decent offseason, but did they get a whole bunch better? I really can't say. I mean, the defense looks around the same as it did last year, maybe a little bit worse with the loss of Tanev. Goaltending looks pretty much the same, and offensively they do lose a big piece in Joe Pavelski. So with all that in mind, I'm giving them a C-. Not a bad offseason, around average. I think they're coming back with a pretty similar looking team to what they had last year, but I think with the losses of Pavelski and Tanev not really replacing them with huge guys, I think there's a very likely chance that this team got slightly worse than last year, but I still think they're going to be a top team in the Central Division. So interesting stuff there. Going over to the Colorado Avalanche. Next up, we have the Colorado Avalanche. Now for the Avalanche, this team was another really good team this past year. Finished with a record of 50, 25, and 7 for 107 points. That was third in the Central Division, fourth in the Western Conference, and eighth in the NHL. So they were still a top 10 team in the NHL. Scored the most goals in the NHL this past year with 304, first in the NHL. So we're a really good goal scoring machine, while 254 goals against was around average, 16th in the NHL. So they were an average team defending the puck, but goal scoring was a lethal weapon for them this past year. So interesting stuff there. Point scorer McKinnon, who, if I'm correct, set a team record for most points in the season, put up 140 points this year, which is one of the top point players in the NHL this year. So interesting stuff there. Mikko Rantanen had 104 points, which was second on the Avalanche, and Makar hit 90 points, which was third on the Avalanche. So they had three 90-plus point players, which was interesting for the Avalanche. They did drop off after that, but still interesting stuff there. McKinnon led the team with 51 goals, followed by Rantanen, who had 42, and Lyubushkin, who had 28. So a couple of guys hit 20 goals, but we even had two 40-goal scorers and one 50-goal scorer for the Avalanche. Interesting stuff there. Sam Malinski wound up being the rookie scoring leader for that team with 3 goals, 7 assists, and 10 points. Well, a really good rookie defenseman who looks like he's going to have a future as like a solid third, maybe even second pair defenseman for the Avalanche. So that's pretty good. In the playoffs, like we said, they wound up making the playoffs as the third team. Wound up losing the first game of the series against Winnipeg, but then won 4 straight, beat the Jets in 5 games. Then they got the Dallas Stars, and like we just talked about, won game 1, lost 3 straight, won game 5, lost game 6, lost the series in 6. So they wound up bowing out in round 2. So it was an interesting series from the Avalanche, but still, it was not an overly great season, but they did have some pretty good players get points in the playoffs. If you look at the playoff scoring leaders, Makar led the team with 15 points, while McKinnon and Rantanen both had 14. And for their goal scorers, Lyubushkin had 9 goals, while Artturi Lehkonen had 6. So interesting stuff there. If you look at their additions and subtractions from this past year's offseason, they brought back Casey Milstead, Jonathan Drouin, Yoel Kiviranta, and Jason Paulin. Some RFAs, some UFAs, but definitely good to see those guys brought back, especially Milstead and Drouin. They also bring in Parker Kelly, Matthew Phillips, who should definitely be solid bomb 6 forwards for the Avalanche. They also add Oliver Kylington, Calvin DeHaan, Jacob McDonald, and Kylie Rosen, as well as Eric Brannstrom on the defensive end. So Kylington and Brannstrom should be solid third pair defensemen, while DeHaan, McDonald, and Rosen should be able to fight for a spare role in the Avalanche's organization. So interesting adds there, but those are some interesting additions from the Avalanche. If you look at their losses, they did lose quite a few players. They lost Yakov Trenin to Minnesota. They lose Brandon Duhaime to Washington. Both were decent in-season acquisitions who played really good roles in their bottom 6. They lose Andrew Cogliano and Zach Parise, 2 veterans who play in their bottom 6, to retirement. They lose Frederick Olofsson to UFA status. They lose Brad Hunt to UFA status. Sean Walker goes and signs in Carolina. Caleb Jones goes and signs in LA. Jack Johnson goes and signs in Columbus. Giovanni Fairbrother doesn't get a qualifying offer, winds up being a UFA. Ivan Prosvetov still a UFA, and Pavel Francouz retired due to career-ending injuries. So interesting note there, but they did lose quite a bit. I mean, they lose Trenin, Duhaime, Cogliano, Parise, Olofsson up front. Lose Hunt, Walker, Jones, Johnson, Fairbrother on the defensive end. Lose a couple of decent goaltenders in Francouz and Prosvetov. So all in all, quite a bit of losses there for the Avalanche this past season. If you look at the trades that they made that didn't involve pick-for-pick swaps, only one that they made, and that was trading a 6th-round pick in 2026 to the Ottawa Senators in exchange for a 2026 7th-rounder and goaltender Kevin Mandelis, who was basically the Ivan Prosvetov replacement. So interesting trade there, but that was the only trade that the Avalanche made this year that didn't involve pick-for-pick swaps. Their top 3 picks from this past year's draft, their first one was in the 2nd round, number 38th overall, and that was Ilya Nabokov, who's a goaltender, could eventually be a solid backup, maybe tandem goaltender for the Avalanche. They also add William Zellers in the 3rd round, 76th overall, should eventually be a solid 2nd, 3rd line center. And the 4th round, they add Jake Fisher, who's a center, 121st overall, once again should contend for eventually a 3rd line center role, maybe. So interesting pickups there. If you look at their 2 biggest questions entering training camp, one is the question about Landeskog's health. There's been some recent reports saying that Landeskog is on the track to recovery, but he probably won't start the season. So the question is, how long does he have to wait until he's going to be ready to start the season for the Avalanche? So that's a big question. And 2 is the Nichushkin suspension. Nichushkin sounds like he's going to be suspended until around November 15th due to being in the player assistance program, 3rd level of it. So interesting note there. Is he going to come back right after suspension? Is it going to be a little bit of a wait and see process? There's going to be a lot of questions question marks around Lyubushkin. So in my opinion, two biggest questions entering training camp is the health of Landeskog and when will Lyubushkin get back from suspension. So those are two biggest questions in my opinion entering training camp for the Colorado Avalanche. Going over to my projected lineup for this team for this upcoming season, I feel like in my projected lineup I have Jonathan Drouin starting on line 1 with Nathan MacKinnon and Mikko Rantanen. I have Miles Wood playing on line 2 with Middleston and Lehkonen. I have Jean-Luc Foudy playing on line 3 with Ross Colton and Logan O'Connor. And on line 4 I have Parker Kelly playing with Yoel Kiviranta and Matthew Phillips. Defensively I have Taves playing with Makar, of course. I have Girard playing with Manson, and I have Brannstrom playing with Kylington. I have Georgiev and Union being the two goalies. I have Landeskog starting the season probably an IR or long-term injury reserve, one of the two. Lyubushkin is going to start out suspended, as we just said. And my spares are Kovalenko, Chris Wagner, and Calvin DeHaan. So those are my spares for the team currently at this point in time. And that would be a cap-compliant roster, at least to start out the season. So interesting stuff there. Going over to my projected point total for this team for this upcoming season. Now, I think the Avalanche did get quite a bit worse. I don't think McKinnon's going to have the exact same season he did last year. I think that there's a very likely chance that some of those top Avalanche players might regress a tiny bit, and I think that would lead to some point totals regression from the Colorado Avalanche, especially if Landeskog and Lyubushkin are out to start the season. So in my opinion, I still have the Avalanche being a top-end team in that division. I still have them making the playoffs, but I do have them taking a little bit of a step back. I have them hitting 99 points, which is 8 points lower than where they were last year. Still a top 3 team in the Central. I have them being 3rd in the Central this upcoming season, which is what they were last year, but I don't have them hitting triple digits this year. So interesting note there, but at this point in time, I think the Avalanche hit 99 points. They will make the playoffs. They will be 3rd in the Central again, but they won't hit the triple digit mark, and they finished 8 points lower than last year, so interesting stuff there. If you look at the 3 areas, you can see this team improve. One has to be better goaltending. Like we said last year, Georgiev was in the playoffs, wasn't really a problem for the Avalanche, but towards the end of the season was definitely overworked, so they need to figure out their goaltending. Can Union play 20 to 30 games and give some rest to Georgiev? Can Georgiev with a little bit more rest play a little bit better? I think they need to figure that out, because I think this team needs some better goaltending. On top of that, they need a solid bottom 6. Like we just said, the top end players were really good, but their bottom end players didn't produce an overabundance of much, even though they were a top end team. So I think there's a very likely chance that they need more production from their bottom 6 to be a better team this year, and they need a stronger defense. Their defense was good last year, Taves, Makar, like we said, but they definitely went through a little bit of change this offseason. Can they have another strong defense, and can that defense and goaltending propel them to above average defense? Definitely. I think those are going to be 3 ways this team can improve to get better for next year. Stronger defense, better goaltending, and a more productive bottom 6. So interesting stuff there. My rating for this team from this offseason, if you look at their offseason losses and additions, their trade, their top 3 picks, didn't really get a whole bunch better in my opinion. If anything, they got a little bit worse. So I'm giving them a D+ rating on the offseason. They lose a couple of solid guys on the defensive market, add some decent replacements, lose a couple of really good players on the forward group, add a couple of decent replacements. So all in all, I think they got a little bit worse for sure, and I think a D+ rating is warranted with how the offseason went for the Avalanche. So that, in my opinion, is what the Avalanche are probably going to be rated for this year, but definitely, that's all I'm going to talk about for today. I left your guys' thoughts on the Avalanche and the Stars down in the comment section below. What do you think about these two teams? What do you think about how they did last year with the Stars reaching the conference final, the Avalanche reaching the second round? How do you think they did this offseason with the Avalanche and their free agency, trade market, top 3 picks in the draft, same thing with Dallas? And what do you think about my projected lineup and point total for these two teams? Plus, what do you think about the 2 biggest questions, 3 ways they can improve my ratings for these two teams? Definitely have to get thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. So I'm going to talk about for today. Until this video, if you're interested, subscribe down below. Thank you for your support. If you guys, if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment down in the comment section below. So it's going to discuss today's video. Also, the blog talking about news, rumors, analysis, stuff like that. So if you check that out, leave a link down in the description below. And can't see you guys all for next video. See you guys soon.